This video provides a quick introduction to the difference between degrees and radians, which are both ways to measure the size of angles. Now, radians are introduced in the AIHL course. They're not in the AISL course, but they are in the AIHL course, and they appear in a range of different concepts, mainly in topic 3 trigonometry, and I'll go through where they appear later on in this video. But let's just firstly talk about what radians are. They are another way to measure the size of an angle. So looking at this top left diagram here, if you're doing AIHL, you should be pretty comfortable using degrees, and remember that there are 360 degrees in a revolution. Well, if we're talking about radians now, there are 2 pi radians in a revolution. So if we start at 0 and go around, keep in mind that 2 pi is just a number. It's about 6.2 something. So there are roughly 6.2 radians in a revolution. So nowhere near as many. There are 360 degrees. So if I drew 1 degree, it'd be like this. The second one would be like this. Third one would be like this, even smaller than that. If I was drawing radians, it would look like the first one, the second one, and so on and so on. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what actually is a radian? If we go down here to what the definition of a radian is, 1 radian angle, this angle here, creates an arc length, this arc length here, equal to the length of the radius. So you can see the similarity in the words radian and radius. 1 radian angle creates an arc length equal to the radius of this circle. Okay, I have the conversions here to how to go between the two. You won't really need to do this that often in the AIHL in exam questions. They'll usually be given to you in degrees or radians, and you just use whatever units are given to you to actually solve that question. But if you do want to know how to convert, this is how you do it, pretty easy. In terms of how to actually write the units, in degrees, you're probably used to writing the little degree symbol here. So for example, 60 degrees. Radians, on the other hand, there are a few different ways that people write it, and textbooks have it in different ways. The first way is actually to not have any units, because radians aren't actually a unit. They're actually a ratio. They're a ratio between the arc length and the radius of the circle. So the technically correct way to do it is to not write any units. However, sometimes that can be a bit confusing, so you do see sometimes units written. The first way is this little, it looks like a C, but that actually stands for the arc of a circle. Or, just to be crystal clear, just write RAD, which stands for radians. So for example, pi on 3 radians. And to be honest, this is the way that I usually write it here. Okay, let's talk about where degrees and radians appear in the AIHL course, and for each of these concepts, which one is used more often. The first is just basic triangle trigonometry. So for example, a triangle, and you're trying to find this angle using the sine rule. Whenever we're dealing with just sort of triangles or shapes, then we usually just use degrees. It's pretty rare that you'll be given an angle in radians. So that's the first way. The second way is when we're looking at arcs and sectors of circles. So for example, you're giving a circle and you want to find maybe the area of this sector. That could be either in degrees or in radians. Questions will be given in either one of those two. The third is when we're dealing with the unit circle. So that's a concept in topic 3 AIHL. The unit circle, and looking at maybe trig identities or exact values for certain trig ratios. Now that'll most likely be in radians. But sometimes you'll also encounter those in degrees as well, but most likely in radians. And then finally, when we're looking at the graphs of trig functions, so for example, sine of x or sine of theta, and it looks like this, that will usually be in radians, but sometimes given in degrees as well. So there we have it there, 4 different sort of applications, and then also trig functions will go into the calculus of trig functions as well. Triangles usually in degrees, and these bottom 3 could either be given in either degrees or radians, so it's important to be comfortable using both these 2 measurements of angle sizes. Now finally, I just want to talk about one very important thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with either degrees or radians is to make sure that your calculator is in the correct mode when you go ahead and find out whatever you're trying to find out. So at the moment, my calculator is in degrees. You can see that here on the top right, it says DEG. If you want to change that, you can either click that over to radians, or if you can't click that, if you've got a manual calculator, you can go into the calculator settings and change it. So in this calculator here, you go Document, Settings and Status, Document Settings, and in angle, it's either radians, degrees, or you've got this third one here, which we never use, called gradians. So just be careful here. Very, very important that you have your calculator in the correct mode whenever you're doing a trigonometry question. Okay, that was a quick overview into the difference between degrees and radians.